Hey everyone, glad you're here with me tonight. Plenty we can talk about. It's just going to be a normal late night chat. We'll see how long it goes, but I'm here to answer your questions and a lot to update you on. So yeah, let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Plenty going on that we can talk about, both in our universe and in the world. There is a lot that we can discuss, so I'm looking forward to discussing it with you. The way we do these streams: standard procedure, opening remarks, roll call, then I answer your questions. So if you have something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, by all means, send me a super chat question, send me a Rumble rant on Rumble, send me a super chat on YouTube. That's the way we do it. If you are on Facebook, I cannot see your questions, so you got to go to Rumble or you got to go to YouTube. But I shouldn't be too hard to find. It's just Caleb Maupin, just like everywhere. And I'm really glad to be answering your questions. So couple announcements, really just one a few announcements. First of all, big announcement, I guess. The biggest announcement is every morning on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel, we have a morning message. People can start their day with revolutionary hope and optimism. We support each other in our community. And because of that, we would like to enable you to start your day with revolutionary hope and optimism. The Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. Every morning we have morning messages from different members of the organization, giving their perspective, and it's good stuff. It's a great thing to do. It's a way to keep people involved. It's a way to keep engaged so that people are constantly plugged into the CPI vibe and what we're all about. It's really, really awesome. So go subscribe to the CPI YouTube channel. And if you are a big fan of this community and what we do, by all means, I would like it if you made a morning message, all right? Because we now have this link that makes it very, very easy for you to make your own morning message. So make one, right? Go and make your own morning message. That's a great way to do it. Make your own morning message. And we have this link where you can make your own morning message so you can inspire other members of the community. Of the community. It's a great way to do things. We are a group of people that are supporting each other. So I'm dropping the submit a morning message link in the chat on the Rumble and on the YouTube. We do need people to step up to the plate and make them, because having one every morning is not easy. So if you have any notion of making one, I would go to the link right now, submit a morning message, and make a morning message, because we need people to do this. And some people, shout out to Dan Niswander. He has stepped up to the plate and made so many of them. Shout out to Rachel W. She has done so many of them. I mean, there's so many people in our community that have really taken this on, as something that they can take on, as their own. So I would encourage you to make a morning message. Now, another announcement, if you are going to be at the Democrat National Convention or the protests surrounding it, or at the Jimmy Dore show tomorrow night in Chicago, be sure you grab one of these. We are giving free copies of Kamala Harris and the Future of America, our book, as well as free copies of Do You Believe in Growth, our book, away at the Jimmy Dore Show tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, it's going to be Alex Jones and Jimmy Dore are having a show in Chicago, and our members are going to be there distributing these books. And if you are then part of the protests against the DNC that are taking place, the protests happening throughout the coming week, our members will be there distributing free books. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to say anything. They'll be just handing them out. So we have 1,000 copies of both of these books to just give away, to learn what CPI's message is all about, to learn the truth about Kamala Harris, why this book was banned from Amazon for 7 days, to learn the truth about Russia and China. We have the Uhuru case is in this book, and we have to talk about it in this book as well. And it's a great amount of outreach. And, not only are our great team of Chicago people doing this, but somebody's driving in from Wisconsin to help out. Somebody flew in from New York City to help out, and all of them are appreciated. And it's a big job. These books are, 1,000 books is not a small number of books. It's quite a large number of books. Shout out to the person who helped me get from New York City to Chicago last week with all the books. And shout out to everyone who's helping hand them out. Much love and appreciation for your efforts. We are a community. We are a community, and we exist to carry out a mission, which is anti-imperialist and progressive education. And that's what the books exist to do. So we do have an option if you would like to support our efforts to get these books to financially support us, which, flying people out and printing the books and transporting the books and storing the books. And it has not been cheap. So we do have a GoFundMe if you want to support the effort, right? If you want to help out this way, you can go to GoFundMe.com. And you can donate to the GoFundMe, to help us with our outreach at the Democratic National Convention. We would love your support in doing so. We've been able to raise a couple $100 just to offset the costs of getting these books where they need to be. But anything you can do would be helped out. And if you're at the DNC protests, say hello to our folks. We have a good crew of very, very dedicated people in Chicago and from, the surrounding area who stepped up to the plate to help get the books out of the DNC. So shout out to them. We forget how hard it is to do actual work. When you're a kid, you forget how amazing your mom is, right? You forget, right? You don't realize, right? It's like the kids, they think that the laundry just does itself. Various things that get done. When you organize, when you participate in actual organizing, you realize how difficult it is to do a lot of the work that makes political organizing happen. And in our case, we're not campaigning for anybody or anything. We're just handing out books, but just getting these books to Chicago, getting people there to distribute them, getting everyone where they need to be, and all of that has been stressful. But that's what we're here to do. You need an organization. Let me repeat that. You need an organization. You need an organization to do the kind of work that we do. And because we have an organization of people who care for each other, people who are committed to this cause, 1,000 copies of both of these books are going to be handed out to people who would probably never have gone looking for this, never heard of this YouTube channel, never heard of our community, never heard the message here. This is making a difference. We are trying to get people to think. And if we're going to change America, we got to stop just doing the social media thing. We've got to actually start approaching people in real life, and we've got to start educating people. And the Center for Political Innovation exists to do that, right? We're about to start our door knocker campaign to support the Uhuru movement. Just got some great updates on that. Shout out to the people in our community who have made that happen. And, we are doing a lot as an organization. So I am really, really proud to be a member of the Center for Political Innovation. I'm proud to know the people in our group who are doing the hard work right now. And even though it's stressful, and even though, they're being pulled in different directions, I think it's tremendous what people are doing. And my hat goes off to everybody who has stepped up to the plate to get those door knockers finished, to get those books printed, to get those books distributed, to get people where they need to be and all of that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is what a real organization is like, right? So thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the work that you're doing. And if you want to be part of this effort, if you want to know the joy of being part of a community and engaging in efforts like this, I encourage you to get involved, right? Right now, we have an email address. If you want to be plugged into the Center for Political Innovation, you go to our website, you hit join, there's an email address there, and we'll plug you in. We are an organization of people that is getting real shit done. There's a lot of people just running their mouths on the internet. We're getting real shit done. But it's not easy to get real shit done. And it requires a lot of patience, and it requires a lot of willingness to be disappointed sometimes, willingness to be frustrated sometimes. And that is what I appreciate, because that's how shit gets done in the real world. And so, we're in a weird period of transition where right now, people have more access to information than they've ever had, which is a good thing. But because of that, the motivation of people to actually get involved in real movements is less. People are content to just kind of be passive observers on their phones, just kind of sit there and listen to politics they agree with, quibble over little differences on their phones. And I have the very unpopular task that's not good for I'm not going to win the internet by saying this, but I have the unpopular task of saying that ain't going to cut it. We need a real community of solidarity. We need a real movement to change the world. We need a real movement to save this country from the nightmare of imperialism and from the collapse of a system based on profits over people. And that's not a popular message. And there's probably a lot of people watching that don't want to hear that. They're annoyed by it. But I'm telling you that the future of our country is not going to be won online. And there's people on the streets of Chicago at this very moment, preparing and getting ready to get shit done. And I am proud to know them. And all of them are 1,000 times more valuable than these doofuses on the internet who think that they're the next Lenin or whatever. And they couldn't do this if they tried. They don't even know what it means to be in a real organization, to get real stuff done. I pity such people. And I'm not going to say too much more about them, but we're getting shit done for real, because real shit needs to really get done, and it's not going to happen online. So thank you. The people watching, thank you for what you're doing. And I will try to give as many updates as I can on this channel about the work that these folks are doing so that people can appreciate it. So there we go. So on that note, folks, let me just remind you how these streams tend to work. First, I give my opening remarks. Then we do the roll call. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions. So if you've got any super chats, anything you'd like me to talk about in the second half of the show, super chat on YouTube, Rumble rant on Rumble. Give me something to talk about in the second half of the show. So now I will jump into, the various things that I wanted to talk about for tonight. First thing, Kim Dotcom. Do you know who Kim Dotcom is? Kim Dotcom. He's a millionaire. I don't know if he's a billionaire. He's a millionaire. He's a wealthy guy. And he's from Germany. And Kim Dotcom, he's been charged with ridiculous criminal charges. He's been living in New Zealand, and they just ruled that he's going to be extradited to the United States. And what is Kim Dotcom's crime? What is it that he could go to jail for a really long time for? He set up a website called Mega Upload. Remember Mega Upload? It was a great website where you could upload videos, that very large files could be uploaded. And the criminal charges against him stem from the fact that the Motion Picture Association of America, the MPAA, that's Hollywood, felt that there were too many people downloading movies off of Mega Upload. Now, Kim Dotcom, when he ran Mega Upload, gave the MPAA full access so that they could go through and delete any files that they felt violated their copyrights. That wasn't enough. Kim Dotcom had every person who used Mega Upload sign a document saying they understood They could not use it for illegal purposes. Didn't matter. The motion picture industry, the movie trash, Hollyweird, didn't want megaupload.com, the website, to exist. And so not only did they, sue him and all of that, they've indicted him. And so he went to New Zealand, but now he's going to be extradited to the United States. And it's bullshit. It's complete bullshit. He did not do anything that violated the law. All he did was have a really good idea. He realized that it was hard to send large files on the internet, and it is still very hard to send large files on the internet. So he created a website so people could do it. He created a server and a website so that people could send large files online. And this is where I want to talk about a couple other things. This is where our politics gets interesting, right? Because I am not a libertarian, certainly not a libertarian. I believe in, we should have a government of action that fights for working families. I believe we should have a planned economy. I believe the state should oversee and control the centers of economic power in order to ensure economic growth. I'm not a libertarian. I don't believe in free market economics. But I am also a believer in innovation. And I do believe that small business owners, creative people who have ideas are essential in any society. And that the part of the problem of 20th century socialism was that there was not room for people to do what Kim Dotcom did and have new ideas. And that China has adjusted. And the reason China is so successful is because they've created a socialist system where there's room for guys like Kim Dotcom and Jack Ma and other innovators, right? That you have a market sector that is facilitated by a government that oversees and controls the means of production. And that this is the secret of 21st century socialism. If you go to Vietnam, their socialist-oriented market economy, they call it, has a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs in it, but it has a state that plans out the economy and subsidizes different businesses in order to make sure you have growth, right? If you go to Nicaragua, their micro-entrepreneurship program has been a really big part of strengthening their overall socialist economy. And that 21st century socialism it has the best of both worlds, right? It has, on the one hand, a government that controls the economy and controls the major centers of economic power. It defeats the big monopolies. A popular government has crushed the power of the big monopolies and controls the economy for the people. But it also has innovators and creative people. And in fact, the state facilitates that innovation, funds, and helps those innovators grow and build. 21st century socialism, it is what communism is supposed to be, and it is what capitalism is supposed to be. Because I was taught my whole life that capitalism is this amazing system. It's this amazing system because in capitalism, if you're smart and you study hard and you are a creative, free-thinking person, you can have an idea and you can implement your idea and you can get rich because you were so smart and you had a great idea. Well, Kim Dotcom is proof that that's not true. Kim Dotcom had a great idea. And his great idea was to set up a website that could facilitate large files being transferred, where large files could be stored. And because he had that great idea, he's risking going to prison for decades. Do you know who else shows that that's not the case? Fred Koch. The Koch brothers. You ever heard of the Koch brothers? Well, their father was Fred Koch. Charles and David Koch, their father was Fred Koch. And Fred Koch was another innovator. He was a chemist. And he studied gasoline and petroleum, and he figured out a method of turning petroleum into gasoline called thermal cracking. He discovered a method of thermal cracking that was very efficient. And so what happened? Well, all the major corporations in the United States sued him and tried to sue him out of existence. So where did he go in order to make his billions of dollars and become the wealthy man who laid the basis for the Koch family fortune? He went to the Soviet Union, and he was hired by Stalin to set up the Soviet oil industry, right? In theory, guys like Kim Dotcom, guys like Fred Koch, they're supposed to be what makes capitalism great. But we all know what really happens in capitalism is that big monopolies rise to the top, and they get in bed with the government, and they rig the rules to be written in their favor. And even if you are a very, very smart guy, and even if you do come up with a new idea, you still get persecuted. And those big monopolies get to make the money, and you get crushed. And the libertarian perspective is, well, that's just not real capitalism. And that's the standard libertarian argument, is they say, well, that's just because it's not real capitalism. But libertarians have never been able to explain to me how this real capitalism stays real capitalism. In their theory, right, well, the government just keeps its hands completely off the economy. And then, magically, stuff like what's happening to Kim Dotcom never happens, right? Because these big monopolies don't write the rules, and they don't persecute the innovators and creative people. And how does that work? When one group of people has way more wealth and power than everybody else, what stops them from using their power and influence to write the laws of the government? Right? So if you look at it, we live in a weird, weird period. And part of the reason that so many of the people that are the most anti-imperialist, the most opposed to having a war with socialist China, the most opposed to having a war with Russia that rebooted its economy with state control of oil and gas, that became what it is today because of the Soviet Union, that is upholding the Soviet legacy on the battlefields of Donbass. The same people that want us to have a better relationship with Cuba and Vietnam and Nicaragua and Venezuela, a lot of them are convinced that we need real capitalism and that our enemy is communism. And the reason that they are confused, and the reason that this gets so weird, and the reason that I don't even want to call myself a communist anymore, I don't like the word communist. The reason I'm using the term innovationist to describe my belief system is because everything has gotten so muddled and confused. If you go to any communist-led country in the world, the strength of their system is very clearly innovators, small business owners, micro entrepreneurs. Meanwhile, in capitalist America, those innovators and creative people that are supposed to be what capitalism is all about are all getting crushed. And this doesn't match the common understanding of what capitalism and communism are. And honestly, it doesn't match what capitalism and communism were described to be in the 20th century either. Things have changed in this world. The Soviet Union fell. And at the time that the Soviet Union fell, the majority of the population wanted to keep the planned economy. They wanted to keep socialism. But the people who had largely turned against the Soviet system were the engineers, the scientists, the doctors, the college professors, the artists, the filmmakers. Those people felt stifled by the Soviet system. They felt stifled by having a bureaucrat approve or disapprove of whatever they did. They felt crushed, not just intellectually, but also economically. I heard the story of a doctor in the Eastern Bloc, and he and his wife would burn their money. They would burn their money as a form of entertainment. Now, what was that about? Why were they burning their money? Well, this guy had worked very hard, and he'd gone to medical school. He'd gotten a degree in medicine. He'd become a medical doctor, and he was working in the Eastern Bloc. I forget which country, Czechoslovakia, Romania, one of these countries, as a doctor. And he got paid 10 times what everybody else got paid. However, with his money, he couldn't do anything. He couldn't buy another house. That was illegal. Couldn't buy another car. That was illegal. Certainly couldn't invest it in a business. That was certainly not allowed. All the items that he wanted that were considered luxury items, like chocolate, good food, all these things were rationed, so he couldn't get more than the standard ration. And so even though he was making 10 times what everyone had made, and even though he had been a very high-achieving person, he was stuck. And that was the situation a lot of great innovative people were in the former Soviet Union. If you were a high-achieving person, if you were a smart person, you were stuck. And on top of that, if you saw a way to make things more efficient, all right, if you were in a steel mill and you saw a way to make it more efficient, the chances were they weren't going to listen to you. If you were an artist or a filmmaker, all right, you had to go to a government bureaucracy to get funding for your film. And a lot of times those government bureaucracies, they gave films to the same people. They didn't want to take risks on a new person. Now, all of these problems exist in capitalism, right? There are problems like this in the capitalist system too. But this was a real problem that 20th century socialism had. For the bulk of the population, 20th century socialism was a great achievement. And it got these countries over the first hurdle of industrialization. And that is why it's very hard to talk about this, because it was even very hard for me to understand this, because I spent my whole childhood and my whole life hearing communism failed everywhere it's ever been tried. Communism failed everywhere it's ever been tried. Whenever you have communism, everyone starves and dies and is miserable. No communist country's ever done anything. We all heard this crap our whole lives. That's just a bunch of crap. It's not true. The Soviet Union invented space travel. They wiped out illiteracy. They electrified the whole country. They built modern universities. I mean, the idea that socialism did just never worked anywhere. I mean, just never, that's just bullshit. Okay? Many countries got over the first hurdle of industrialization with 5-year economic plans under the leadership of a Marxist-Leninist party. Communists paved the roads. Communists built the power plants. Communists created the university system and the public school system. These are facts. And they lie about them over and over and over. And the lying about these facts is infuriating to me. And I, as a young person, discovered that these were lies when I'd been told the Soviet Union had never achieved anything. And then I found basic economic data to say otherwise. I became very, very angry. Soviet Union had great economic achievements, and so did Romania, and so did Czechoslovakia, and so did Poland, and so did East Germany, and so did Cuba, and so did People's Korea, and many of these countries, under the leadership of communists, had very dramatic improvements in life expectancy, in living standards, etc. And this must be said. This absolutely must be said. When it comes to getting countries that have been kept in poverty by the domination of Western capitalism over that first hurdle of industrialization, socialist planned economies under the leadership of Marxist-Leninists, under the leadership of Baathists, under the leadership of Gaddafi and Islamic socialism in Libya, they have done amazing things. However, after you get over that first hurdle, and after the country has power plants and steel mills, after it has a modern school system, after the roads have been paved, after the country's been electrified, after you get over that first hurdle, a problem starts to set in. Because at that point, it's no longer about just laying the foundations of the economy, building the infrastructure. It's about the things that make life enjoyable. right? Obviously, if this apartment that I was living in did not have electricity, I would be in a world of hurt. And obviously, if this apartment that I was living in did not have running water, I would be in a world of hurt. And if the roads in front of my apartment were not paved so people could drive on them, I would be in a world of hurt. And we almost take that for granted in Western countries. And that's why it is so easy to lie to us about socialism and its achievements. We just kind of assume the countries naturally have these things. No, they don't. No, they do not. And if you go to Honduras, big parts of Honduras don't have that. You go to Guatemala, big parts of Guatemala don't have that. You go to Nigeria, big parts of Nigeria do not have that. You go to most African countries, people do not have that. They don't have schools for their kids to go to. They don't have running water. They don't have electricity. You go to Yemen, they do not have that. And it's communists who come in with state-run economies and they build that. And that's a really big fucking deal. Forgive my foul language, but it's a really big deal. And so when communists can do that, ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron have been investing and dominating Nigeria for 200 years. They haven't done it. But Stalin comes to power in the Soviet Union, and in 5 years, he implements a 5-year economic plan. They implement it in 4 years. He does it. That's a big deal, right? Gaddafi takes power in Libya, and they do it. That's a big deal. However, it's not enough. Obviously, you have more in your apartment or your home than an electric lights. You have more in your home than just your bathtub and your running water. You want consumer goods, right? You want nice clothes to wear. You want, if you have kids, your kids are going to want toys to play with. You might want books to read. There's other things that people have for their enjoyment. But if you don't have running water and you don't have electricity and you don't have paved roads and you don't have schools and you don't have literacy, you're not thinking about those other things. But it's after you get over that first hurdle of industrialization that suddenly you're like, hey, what about those other things? Well, what we have learned is that for those other things, the market is helpful. Is it better to have people and to have some bureaucrat decide what clothes get created? Or is it better to let people vote with their dollars? Well, I have come to understand that it is better to let people vote for their dollars. I don't think that the government Department of Clothing should make a determination about what clothes we should wear. No, I think, there should be people who design clothes for a living, who are motivated by making a profit, who try to design the best clothes ever, and that we, the consumers, should be able to go vote with our dollars on what those clothes should be. And I don't think that is in contradiction to socialism. As long as profits are not in command, as long as unemployment is not possible, as long as we do not have a society where people become hungry because there's too much food, when people become homeless because there are too many houses, as long as we don't have a society where the richest of the rich get rich by making everyone else poor, where the people at the top have an incentive to impoverish everyone else. If you can have a society where the economy overall is controlled, where banking and the assigning of credit is done strategically in the interest of the country overall, with a planned economy and a national bank. If your natural resources, oil, natural gas, coal, timber, electricity, utilities are in the public hands. If you have a society where the state is constantly building and mobilizing the population to build and organizing industrial output. If you have an economic bill of rights to make sure that people have housing and education, to make sure that people's labor is utilized, that all the labor power of the country is utilized, that education is provided, in such a society, somebody starting up a clothing company and making money based on how well the clothes they make are and how much people would like to buy the clothes that they make, I think that's a fine thing. Someone opening up a hotel and having people vote with their dollars if they like to stay at the hotel, if it's a pleasant experience, then that they make money, that has its place. that a market can exist within the context of an overall socialist planned economy. I believe that. And I have not yet found arguments against it to be convincing. I have heard people point to aspects of market socialism in China that are unpleasant and unjust and need to be corrected. I've also heard people point out that there is still exploitation in that context, and it would be better if these were worker cooperatives, if the workers of these enterprises had a share of the profits. You didn't have an individual capitalist, and that I can hear that argument to some degree, but I have not yet heard to this day an argument about I think about the things that I enjoy doing, not the things that I take for granted, like the roads, like the electricity, like the running water, but the things that I enjoy doing. The things that I enjoy doing, and I have a hard time understanding how the things that I have fun with would be better if the market was not involved in facilitating them. Right? I have a hard time with. I feel like, I think about the restaurants I like to eat in. I feel like, the market has a role in making them enjoyable. Now, obviously, the market has its problems, but, I feel like the market has a role in a planned economy. And if you go to Venezuela and you go to Nicaragua, you go to China, you go to Vietnam, that is the case. And in fact, North Korea would like to be more like this. And Cuba already has a mixed economy and a market economy. They would like to have more of a mixed economy, right? And that I don't think having entrepreneurs, people who have an idea, like Kim Dotcom, I don't think that's a threat to socialism. And who really doesn't think that is the socialist governments. They really don't think that. And in fact, they do everything they can. They need those people. They work very, very hard. And when I go to Russia, to these events with the high-achieving youth, that's who they're talking to. They need those young people to go out and start businesses. They need those young people to invent new software programs. And in fact, they do everything they can to facilitate it. And actually, it is the communist and socialist and anti-imperialist countries nowadays that are better to those people than our society is. Our society crushes those people, because our society is run by big monopolies, ultra monopolistic corporations that don't want creative people like Kim Dotcom. Instead, they want Google, Amazon, Microsoft. They don't want Mega Upload. They don't want this guy who had a new idea. He needs to be crushed. And that goes against everything we're taught about the greatness of the free market and all of that. But that's the world that we're living in. Things are way more complicated than you would think. Communism is better at capitalism. At least capitalism in the libertarian sense. What libertarians think capitalism is, communism is way better at these days. And the free market capitalist West is crushing this capitalism more blatantly than ever before. And of course, that then causes people in the lower levels of capital to think it's communism, because their understanding of how the world exists, they see the world as simply a struggle between big government and the free market. Whereas those of us who come at things from a Marxist background have an understanding of humanity moving toward a higher mode of production. We have an understanding that capitalism has entered its monopolistic stage of imperialism, and we understand that. But in their worldview, socialism is big government, free market is capitalism. That's what they think. And so in their view, the big monopolies using the government to crush guys like Kim Dotcom is communism. Well, it's not communism. It's capitalism becoming more monopolistic. And the communist countries of the world love guys like Kim Dotcom. In fact, they depend on them, and they're cultivating them desperately and doing everything they can to facilitate them. And Kim Dotcom is a huge fan of Putin and Russia, and he defends China. He's an anti-imperialist, even though he's definitely not a communist, and even though he's a capitalist, a guy who is supposed to be what capitalism is all about. Kim Dotcom is why I'm supposed to love capitalism. I'm supposed to love capitalism because of guys like Kim Dotcom. Kim Dotcom is what capitalism is supposed to be all about, right? In our great American system, why you see that there's a need for a website that can facilitate people, having uploading big files, and you see a need and you create a fill for that need, and the market rewards you and you get rich. Well, Kim Dotcom is on the brink of going to federal prison. So why? Because the big monopolies run the government and they rig it. And there's so many examples of this, right? The Silk Road guy, Phil Ulbricht, right? What did he do? He designed a website, and people then used that website for criminal activity, similar to what Kim Dotcom did. He designed a website, and then people used it to pirate movies. He didn't do it. And in fact, he did everything. He made the people sign that they wouldn't do it. He gave the motion picture film access. Ross Ulbricht. Yeah. Ross Ulbricht did the same thing. He saw, hey, there needs to be a website where people can sell stuff. So he created a website. And that's supposed to be what capitalism is all about, right? That's great. That's why our great American system works, right? Is that people can invent a website. Well, he's in prison for a long time. Right. And we live in very, very confusing times. And our understanding as innovationists, look, I am very, very thankful for the education that I've received. Right. I've got a lot more to say tonight. The night is young, as they say. I got plenty more to say, but let's just go over this. Okay. So when I was a kid, I'm just going to quickly lay out, right? Who else am I going to talk about? Who do I know better than myself, right? Maybe I'm a narcissist. Maybe it's egotistic. I'm going to tell you how I learned all of this. So it started out, I was a kid living in my small town, and there were things about economics that just didn't make sense. Why are there homeless people when there's empty houses, right? Why, it just seemed like things didn't make sense. And every time I brought up different ideas I had about economics. Why don't we just give everyone health care? Kind of like the government makes roads. Why don't we give people health care? Well, that's called communism, kid. And I was just constantly hearing about this thing called communism. And communism was bad, I was told, because it just never worked anywhere. And then I discovered basic economic data. And I learned that communist countries had been very, very successful. And that I was lied to. And whenever I mentioned basic economic data about the Soviet Union industrializing, about the Soviet Union wiping out illiteracy, everyone got scared and nervous. And they'd say, well, maybe there's some truth in that, blah, 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 gulags, blah, blah. And even when I went to college, this is how it was. No one could just admit that the Soviet Union had economic achievements, that Eastern European countries had great economic successes, that Cuba has had great economic successes. Nobody could admit that. It's the party line in America that we just pretend everyone just starves and is miserable every time they have socialism. And everyone says this over and over and over again, and no one pushes back on it, right? You just get people saying blatantly untrue anti-communist things, and then you get a bunch of people that say, well, that wasn't real communism, and nobody can stick up for the obvious elephant in the room, which is the great economic achievements of socialism. And so on that basis, I thought communism had to be right because everyone was lying about it all the time. And so I got more interested in communism, and I started hanging out around communist groups, and I got a bit frustrated because my interest in communism was about economics. And, I learned a lot about the history of racism in the United States, and I got involved in protests around police brutality, which was very important and educational for me. And I learned a lot about imperialism and the wars. A lot of these communists I worked with had been involved in the 1960s anti-war movement. So I was educated in those ways. But 2008, the economy crashed when I was in college. The U.S. economy crashed. And when the U.S. economy crashed, I was given a great deal of socialist education about why the U.S. economy crashed. And that was key. Right? Around the time that the U.S. economy crashed, right, I was in the Workers' World Party, and Fred Goldstein, a member of the Workers' World Party, published this book, Low-Wage Capitalism, the New Globalized High-Tech Imperialism, What It Means for the Class Struggle. He published that book, and he went on a speaking tour. And he explained that the crisis that we were in was because of the computer revolution. And it was because of the fact that labor is being replaced by human technology. Right? And Fred Goldstein, this book he wrote, Low Wage Capitalism, is largely inspired and based on another book that was published in the 1980s called High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy. This book makes roughly the same case. And around that time, I rediscovered a book that I had opened up but never really understood. A book that makes the same line of argument, which I don't know where my copy of it is, but it's called The Future is Up to Us by Nelson Puri. And between High Tech, Low Pay and Low Wage Capitalism and The Future is Up to Us by Nelson Puri, I understood why the U.S. financial crisis had happened. I learned that the inherent flaw in capitalism is this: abundance creates poverty. There's a little boy. It's wintertime. He says to his father, "Why is it so cold?" The father says, "Because I cannot afford any coal to heat our home with, son." The little boy says, "Father, why can you not afford any coal with which to heat our home?" And the father says, "Because I lost my job at the coal mine. I have been laid off." And he says, "Father, why were you laid off from your job at the coal mine?" And the father says, "Because there is too much coal." That is the coal miner's riddle, and that is the problem inherent in the capitalist mode of production. Abundance creates poverty. Labor-saving technology creates economic crises. The worker is also the consumer. And the lower the wages of the worker get, and the less workers that need to be hired on the assembly line, the more replaceable the worker is, the easier the worker is to retrain, the less spending power the worker has. The worker is also the consumer. And as you eliminate the worker from production, as you drive down the worker's wages, his ability to buy things goes down. And this is a constant problem in the capitalist mode of production. The wages paid out in the process of production are never enough to buy back the products that are produced. Ever. And on top of that, it is only from human labor that the capitalist can extract profit. He can't extract profit from machines. He can't extract profit from materials. The only way that the capitalist can extract profit in the process of production is from human labor power. And so as the role of human labor power in production decreases, the rate of profit that the capitalist makes on each product decreases. And this is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. And it leads to long-term economic crises. And when there is a huge leap in technology, the result is you have a long-term economic crisis. It takes a really long time for the economy to adjust, and wages go down, and unemployment rises, and there's a big mess. And businesses fail, and everything falls apart. Because what? Because there's too much coal. Right now should be the greatest moment in human history. We should be living in more wealth and extravagance than ever before. Why? Because we've got machines that can trade stocks better than humans can. We've got machines that can play chess better than humans can. We've got machines that can do anything. We got artificial intelligence. This should be a moment of amazing wealth and prosperity for all humanity. We should be richer. We should be rolling in it. We should be more comfortable and happier than ever before right now, because our human innovation and our human creativity, our ability to invent new things, what Kim Dotcom did with his genius invention of megaupload.com, it has gone to such great heights that we should be living better than ever before, but that is not the case. Our younger generation have a lower living standard than ever before. We have a mass refugee crisis of people fleeing their home countries, desperately trying to get someplace where they can survive, drowning in the Mediterranean, dead bodies along the Mexican border. We've got a crisis of student debt and household debt. The family-owned home is a thing of the past. Our country is falling apart. Why? We should be wealthier than ever before. The world should be wealthier than ever before. And it's going to get worse. Self-driving cars is pretty soon going to happen. And that should be great, because human labor, the labor power of driving, is no longer going to be necessary. But Andrew Yang and others have warned us that if self-driving cars come along, there's going to be mass unemployment and hunger and poverty in the streets. Why? Because a lot of people make their livelihoods through driving. This isn't rational. And that's why we need a rationally organized economy. And part of that rationally organized economy will be guys like Kim Dotcom who have great ideas. In fact, we will facilitate them. And if you go to socialist countries, those guys are facilitated. But right now, those guys are getting crushed. I am 100% supporting Kim Dotcom. I am supporting Ross Ulbricht. I am supporting all of these lower level capitalists that are being crushed by the big monopolies. Because guys like that are the motive force for 21st century socialism. We are not against people having businesses. We are not against people having new ideas and being creative. We're not against people opening a restaurant or a hotel. We are against ultra monopolies dominating the economy and grinding us into poverty. We are against a system where profits come before people. We're against a society where your value is merely a financial calculation. That is what we are against. Let us be absolutely clear about this. We are not opposed to capitalists. We are opposed to capitalism. And capitalism is a system where profit dictates everything. And when we are in favor of socialism, socialism is when we have an economy that is organized to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. And in socialism, you can have entrepreneurs. And in fact, modern socialist countries are very clear about that. Modern socialist countries want entrepreneurs. And what we need, the lower level capitalists who are getting crushed by Jeff Bezos and getting crushed by Microsoft and Amazon and ExxonMobil and BP, what they need to come to understand is that a popular socialist government would be their best friend, because it would kick Jeff Bezos' ass. And it would kick the ass of ExxonMobil and BP and Shell and Chevron. And it would pave the roads in their neighborhood. And it would build new power plants, a new high-speed railway. It would provide education. It would provide industrialization. It would provide subsidies to help them do their work. It would have a national bank that assigned credit to them, the lifeblood of the economy, the innovators, not to the big bankers, but to them, and strategically lend money so that they operated in a way that benefited. The lower level capitalists would very much benefit from a government of action that fought for working families, 21st century socialism. It is the ultra monopolies that are grinding us into poverty. They are the ones that should be afraid. And they are really becoming the enemies of all of our society. What we need is an anti-monopoly coalition. And that's a whole nother conversation for another night. But I just want to be clear about that. I want you to look into Kim Dotcom. We need to do everything we can to support Kim Dotcom and guys like him, because this points to the hypocrisy And that, yes, a lot of the anti-imperialists out there are people from his class background. And we need to align with those folks, and we need to get them to understand why the countries that they sympathize with are so friendly to them, and how capitalism, as we understand it, is not about crushing them. It's about standing up against the power of the ultra monopolies. And that we are innovationists because we believe in human creative power, and we believe in lifting the restraints on human creative power that are imposed by the irrational system where profits come before people. We are innovationists. We believe that human technology can advance and advance and advance and get to the point that a state is not even necessary. We could get to a society where the need for a government fades away and people can just live in freedom. But in order to get there, we must get rid of the irrationality of profits in command. Now, I want to talk about another topic, which is, I just want to throw this out there because I've been dealing with this from multiple people I've been talking to. And it's interesting because, you know, we're all surrounded by different people. But it's important to talk to people with whom you disagree. And it's important to talk to people with whom you agree on some things, but don't agree on other things. And one thing that I would like to address is, number one, the issue of elections and why they do and don't matter. And number two, the issue of endorsements, etc. So the first thing, right? Do elections matter? The answer is not really. They do to some degree or other, right? I have said over and over again that I think Trump, of all the candidates that have a chance of actually winning, we were probably slightly better off with Trump. But do I think that Trump is going to be president and not do a lot of bad things? No. Everything that Trump is saying right now about Israel, horrible. Everything Trump is saying about Iran right now, horrible. Some of the stuff he's saying about Ukraine, a little bit better. But Trump is saying all horrible, awful things as president. I mean, and I think Trump could very well do a lot of those awful things. What would stop Donald Trump from doing awful things? All of us voting for somebody else? No. All of us voting for Kamala Harris? Definitely not. Elections are not the determining force. The determining force in whether good things or bad things happen is the balance of power. And I have met so many people who do not understand this. People that are good folks, that are anti-imperialist, that are pro-Palestine, that don't want a new world war with Russia, that are sympathetic to China. And I say to them, what do you think we should do? And they say, vote. Multiple people, oh, vote, vote. And some of them want me to vote for Kamala Harris because they think Trump is the worst one. And some of them want me to vote for Donald Trump because they think that he's the better one. And none of them get it. That, yeah, it'll make a difference. I think having Trump in there is slightly better than having Kamala in there. But even if Trump does get in there, what would make Trump do better things and what would make Trump do worse things? It's the balance of forces. Richard Nixon, he was a right-wing president. He took power on a platform of opposing the civil rights movement, of opposing the anti-Vietnam War movement. He was a right-wing strongman. Average Americans, middle class, small town Americans did not like those hippies, did not like those black radicals and their riots. They voted for Richard Nixon. He said he was for the silent majority. And what did Richard Nixon do? Well, he escalated the Vietnam War, but then he ended it. And Richard Nixon lowered the voting age to 18. Richard Nixon created the first affirmative action program in government hiring. Richard Nixon created the Workplace Health and Safety Administration to protect employees on the job. Richard Nixon, he also created the Environmental Protection Agency. Richard Nixon recognized China Well, actually, he didn't give them full recognition, but he became the first American president to go meet with Mao Zedong. And he went to China, and he started the process of the USA having diplomatic recognition with China. Now, why did Richard Nixon do all those things? He took power on a platform of being a right-wing, anti-communist conservative. So why did he do all of those things? Because there was a movement. Because there were a bunch of people out in the streets protesting for those things. Because there was a new upsurge of the labor movement. The postal workers went on strike in 1970 all over the country. The auto workers, led by Drum, were leading, wildcat strikes, wildcat summer, 1972, 73. The labor movement was rising. The anti-war movement was rising. The young people were burning their draft cards. They didn't want to fight. There was an upsurge of left-wing activism, not voting, activism. And his job was to bring stability. And so despite taking power on a very conservative platform of hating the movement in order to stabilize society, he enacted more progressive reforms to make life better for working people and to improve the USA's relationship with the world, ending the Vietnam War, meeting with Mao. Why? Because the movement, let me emphasize that word, the movement was big enough. And then take Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton took power saying that the Reagan years were over. Ladies and gentlemen, I come from a little place called Hope. And Ronald Reagan just doesn't care about American people. There's too many people that are struggling. I'm Bill Clinton, and I care about you. I was the governor of Arkansas. Bill Clinton was supposed to be a left-wing president. I believe, was it Toni Morrison said he was the first African-American president. What did we get under Bill Clinton? We got NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that devastated the lives of American workers, was a punch in the face to the American labor movement. What did we get? We got mass incarceration. He was supposedly the first black president of the United States, according to Toni Morrison, but he imprisoned people like you wouldn't believe. And Hillary Clinton started going around, his wife started talking about super predators. There's these super predators, and they locked up black people at record rates. He got rid of welfare for women with children. He cut off aid to women with children. I don't know how he sleeps at night, but he got rid of welfare as we know it. He got rid of aid to mothers with children. Bill Clinton was a very, very, very bad president for American working families. But why? He got elected on a platform of saying, I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to fight. I'm not like Ronald Reagan. I come from a little place called Hope. Why did Bill Clinton do that? Because the Soviet Union had fallen. The Soviet Union had fell. And the labor unions were weaker than ever before. And all the communist groups were in free fall. And capitalism was the new world order. It was the new system, right? It was the new world order, according to George Herbert Walker Bush. It was the end of history, according to Francis Fukuyama. And so that was the way the world was moving. The little guy, the working man, was getting crushed. Big monopolies were making out like billions. Black people were getting locked up. That was the way the world was moving. And it didn't matter if he talked nice. He was a horrible president because of the balance of forces. And the reason that Richard Nixon was a good president was because there was a movement when Richard Nixon was president. And the reason that Bill Clinton was a bad president was because the movement was getting kicked in the teeth and was falling apart when Bill Clinton was president. It's about the balance of forces. At the time that Richard Nixon was president, the communist movement globally was rising, and the mass movement for justice in the streets of the United States was rising. And so Richard Nixon had to do good things. At the time that Bill Clinton was president, the Soviet Union had fallen. The communist movement was in complete and utter retreat. And in the United States, the labor movement and the left-wing activist movements were all falling apart. And so the balance of forces enabled Bill Clinton and the ruling class to push forward their agenda. It's not about who you vote for. Who you vote for matters in some ways. But ultimately, what determines anything is the balance of forces. There's a famous story of Roosevelt, the great President Roosevelt. Roosevelt met with A. Philip Randolph, the leader of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the only African-American majority labor union at the time. And A. Philip Randolph pitched him a number of progressive reforms that would improve the lives of working people. And what did Franklin Roosevelt tell A. Philip Randolph? He said, go out and make me do it. Meaning build the mass movement in the streets that will enable me or force my hand so that I can do it. And it was only because the Communist Party built mass unemployment councils and mass labor organizing that Roosevelt was even able to get away with passing Social Security or unemployment insurance or any of that. Now, there are divisions within the ruling class, and strategic alliances are important. And if Roosevelt had not won the 1936 presidential election, things probably would have gone very differently in world history. And it was right of the Communist Party to basically support Roosevelt in 1936. And that there are divisions, and voting does matter. It's not completely irrelevant. But this idea that all we can do is vote, and so we better be voting for the right person, that's wrong. I have told you all, there is a very good chance that Donald Trump could win the upcoming election and do awful things. And there's a chance that Donald Trump could win the election and do good things. I think there's a very slim chance that Kamala Harris will do good things if she's in office, but even that is possible if the balance of forces were to very rapidly change. Don't count on it. I'm telling you that it's about the balance of forces, globally and domestically. That is what determines things, not which personality is in office. And so with that in mind, I want to move on to the next point, which is that first of all, let me just talk about it from a personal perspective. Our organization, the Center for Political Innovation, does not campaign for anybody. There are people in the Center for Political Innovation that are probably going to vote for Trump. There are people in the Center for Political Innovation that will vote for RFK. There are people in the Center for Political Innovation that will vote for Jill Stein. There are people in the Center for Political Innovation that might vote for other candidates. We don't tell people how to vote. We do not take a position on the elections. We do not campaign for anybody. That's how it is, right? We have no ability to change how people vote. We don't campaign. And I mean, we're not huge. We don't really have the ability to change the outcome of the elections. That said, if you ask me, Caleb, what is the best possible outcome? I will tell you. And what I'm telling you is not based on me giving my moral approval to everything that Donald Trump does or says. It is based on my assessment of who could actually win the election. Jill Stein, no. RFK, no. Of all the candidates that actually have a chance of winning in our rigged two-party system that is completely unfair and corrupt, and yes, but based on that, there's only two candidates who have a chance to win, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And based on that reality, I have determined in my analysis there are three ways this election can go. First thing that is possible, the worst case scenario, in my opinion, is Kamala Harris winning. Kamala Harris is psychologically unwell. Kamala Harris has been trained and is a damaged person that the imperialist war machine knows how to manipulate. Kamala Harris represents mass incarceration. She has no shame about how she destroyed thousands of people's lives as prosecutor in California. She thinks Donald Trump meeting with Kim Jong-un and trying to make peace on the Korean Peninsula was a crime. She has been picked by Israel and under Israeli controls for decades. Paul LaRudy confirmed that on an interview on this YouTube channel shortly after I first wrote my Kamala Harris book. I mean, Kamala Harris is everything bad. She is a synthetic personality. She is their puppet. She is a puppet of the low-wage police state. She is a puppet for the people pushing for World War III. She wants vengeance. She's unstable. She's everything bad. So that's the worst case scenario. And I think if Kamala Harris wins, which I don't think she will win the popular vote, the idea that Kamala Harris is going to win the popular vote is absurd. I think that Kamala Harris winning this election would probably be the result of fraud, and that if she is declared the winner of the election, there would likely be, a big crackdown. And they're already starting the crackdown. The Uhuru 3 go on trial September 3rd, right? That's Biden that prosecuted a group of black socialists. If Donald Trump had prosecuted a group of black socialists, people would have been in the streets doing something about it. But because Biden was president, all these people that are supposedly so woke and they love black people have done nothing for the Uhuru movement, right? The communist movement has revealed itself to be nothing but shills of the Democratic Party. I went to the rally yesterday to support the Uhuru 3 here in New York City. And who was there? People from their organization, people from the December 12th movement, a black nationalist organization in New York City, people from the Workers' World Party. That was about it. And I thought, where is the Party of Socialism and Liberation? Where are all these Maoists? Where are all these Trotskyites? Where are all these people that are racism and all that? There's a group of black people about to be thrown in prison for their speech, which the government says is acting as a Russian agent. Where are these people? They don't care because they're just Democrats deep down. They have Trump derangement syndrome. And so they're more concerned with keeping the Biden-Harris machine in power, the very machine that's imprisoning the Uhuru movement, than they are, So, yeah, the crackdown has already started. They raided Scott Ritter's home. The FBI raided Scott Ritter's home. Sue May Terry, the top, South Korean, expert of the Bush and Obama administration, has been arrested and charged as being a foreign agent. They are going crazy. They are arresting everybody. They're about to extradite Kim Dotcom. I mean, they are throwing everybody in jail left and right. It is nuts. They are going crazy at this point, trying to crush people. So if Kamala Harris gets in, you can expect there'll be a clampdown. You can expect some people are going to have handcuffs on. You can expect there's going to be heavy political repression if she gets in. That's the worst case scenario, in my view, because that's what Kamala Harris has always done, right? Kamala Harris is a spiteful, vengeful person. Kamala Harris is triggered by, people supporting Donald Trump. And that's the first outcome that I think is possible. Escalation, with Russia, political crackdown, that's probably the result of a Kamala Harris presidency. Now, if the balance of forces changed, maybe not, but that's probably what would happen. That's the worst case scenario. Second scenario, which I think is the most likely scenario, I'm being honest with you, and this is not a good scenario. It's slightly better than the Kamala Harris scenario, but it's not good, is that Donald Trump wins the election. He wins it because of his populist kind of appeal. And so based on that, all the bad things about Donald Trump get amped up. The pro-Israel voices aligned with Trump amp up their pro-Israel sentiments. The anti-immigrant voices associated with Trump amp up their anti-immigrant sentiments. The pro-police state, the anti-China associate. And I think that's very likely to happen. That if Donald Trump wins, the most likely scenario is that Trump wins and all the bad aspects of Trumpism get amped up. Not good. Slightly better than Kamala winning and throwing everyone in jail, but not good. That's the most likely outcome. We need to prepare for that. Third scenario. Donald Trump wins the election somehow, despite being at odds with the overwhelming majority of the American government and the American elite. Now, that has rarely happened. Occasionally in American history, you will get a president that does that. Lincoln is a great example of that. Lincoln took office with very solid opposition from Wall Street, very solid opposition from the Southern slave owners and the British Empire. But Lincoln built an anti-monopoly coalition representing the Northern industrialists and the free soilers, the small farmers, and the labor unions and the abolitionists. And Abraham Lincoln managed to get elected at odds with the bulk of the capitalist class. Roosevelt is a similar story. When Roosevelt first got elected, he was just kind of a regular politician, but in his 1936 election, he was opposed by the overwhelming majority of his class, but he still won because he was enacting progressive reforms and his rhetoric shifted in a Bonapartist progressive way. And that if some kind of situation like that were to develop, where Donald Trump won despite being at odds with the FBI and the CIA and the Pentagon and the bulk of the ruling class, under those circumstances, some amazing things could actually happen. Now, I think that is the best possible outcome, but I think it's very rare. I think it's very unlikely. But it would be the ideal situation. And there's a couple hints that give me hope. The first thing that gives me hope is that the president of South Korea today, my God, am I getting emotional over this? The president of South Korea today gave a speech saying he wants peaceful reunification with North Korea. I don't know if you saw this. I'm actually getting emotional. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. But President Yoon gave a speech today saying that he wants to unify North and South Korea. And that if North Korea just takes steps toward denuclearization, they will start giving aid to North Korea. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. You know? And I mean, this speech, this is not what the United States wants. Go and read it for yourself. This is not what America is telling him to say. And North Korea has even stopped talking about peaceful reunification. But now, South Korea's President Yoon gave a speech saying he seeks dialogue and a path to peaceful reunification with North Korea, promising North Korea all kinds of money and aid. It is utterly amazing. Now, what's going on here? What is the context of this? Go and read it for yourself. I didn't believe it when I saw it. What is the context? Well, the context is that North Korea has said that if Trump gets reelected, they will resume talks with North Korea or with Trump. And on top of that, the United States is angrier than ever at North Korea and has demanded that South Korea escalate against North Korea in retaliation for the fact that Russia and North Korea are militarily cooperating. And South Korea has refused to escalate against North Korea. And South Korea has had their biggest ally in Washington arrested and charged with being a foreign agent. And now President Yoon of South Korea gave a speech laying out a path to peace. And I saw this and I was like, damn, the stakes are high in this election. South Korea is betting on Donald Trump winning the election. But they are betting on Donald Trump winning the election at odds with the American deep state. That gives me hope. Why would South Korea make this gamble? I'll tell you what's going on here. There's a comedian named Lenny Bruce, very famous American comedian. I actually don't find Lenny Bruce to be that funny. I know Lenny Bruce. He was very famous for going to prison, going to jail for like a week because he said the F word. And he was a comedian in New York City in like the 1960s. And I listened to audio recordings of Lenny Bruce. I just don't find him to be that funny. But there is a joke that Lenny Bruce told that I do think is rather clever. It goes like this. This is the joke. This joke of his I appreciate. I really don't find Lenny Bruce to be that funny. I think I'm missing the context. But This joke I appreciate. The joke is that the Lone Ranger, right? There used to be an old TV show called The Lone Ranger. It was about a guy who wore a mask, a cowboy who wore a mask, and he had a sidekick named Tonto, who was a Native American, right? And he was the hero, and they used to play the dum 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 dum. You know, they would play the William Tell overture, and it was a TV show. So the joke is that the Lone Ranger and Tonto are surrounded. They're by the edge of a cliff, and there's a tribe of Indians surrounding them, and they've got their spears out, and they're coming to get them, and all of that. And there's no escape. And the Lone Ranger looks over the cliff, and he sees there's no way out, and he sees the crowd of Indians. So he turns to Tonto, and he says, "Tonto, what are we going to do?" And Tonto says to him, "What do you mean we, white man?" That's kind of what's happening here on the Korean Peninsula. Russia does business in South Korea. China does business in South Korea. The USA also does a lot of business in South Korea, and the USA has a bunch of troops in South Korea. Now, at this point, South Korea is thinking, okay, Russia's our friend, China's our friend, America's our friend, and North Korea is our neighbor to the north. North Korea, the peninsula is divided. America wants us to go escalate a provocation with North Korea. Now, the Chinese don't want that, and the Russians don't want that, and we don't want that. Public opinion in South Korea is very much in favor of peace. So, what's in it for us? What do we benefit? What do we benefit from escalating against North Korea? Well, North Korea just met with Putin, and they're doing stuff with Russia. Well, we do business with Russia. What's your point? Well, North Korea, they're friends with the Chinese communists. So are we. Wait, I'm not getting your point, America. Like, what is in it for us? Well, they're your enemy, North Korea. Well, we're all Koreans here. We speak the same language. We got families that are divided, and I'm just not seeing what's in it for us, America. Well, you're supposed to do what we say. That's why we've got hundreds of troops on your soil. We prop you up. That's why. Well, I'm not seeing what's in it for us, America. Why don't we try to reopen negotiations? Well, you can't do that. And so they grab Sume Terry. They arrest her. And they're like, wow. So now you've retaliated against our most trusted person in Washington, D.C. Not a North Korean sympathizer by any means. An actual, very strong former CIA agent, worked in the Obama White House, worked in the Bush administration. But she wants us to, she's not in favor of escalating on the peninsula, and she's friendly to South Korea. And so now you're going to call her a foreign agent. The same law they used to raid Scott Ritter's home, the same law they're using against the Huru movement, they're using against Sume Terry, who's been like the biggest establishment military shill in Washington, but she's too friendly with the South Korean government. And so they're charging her with being a foreign agent. At this point, it's very, very obvious. South Korea, they're just like, yeah, we would like to prefer a path of peace with North Korea. And North Korea said, hey, if Donald Trump gets back in, we're for it. South Korea is betting on Donald Trump winning this election. Now, that's inspiring to me. The other thing that inspired me is that Donald Trump spoke at the Libertarian Party convention. I was there. I was in the room. We handed out thousands of these booklets, and I was in the room. My friend Angela McCurdle, head of the Libertarian Party, has a great YouTube channel you should go subscribe to. Doesn't agree with me at all on a lot of things, but she's anti-war. She's anti-deep state. She organized the Rage Against the War Machine rally. Angela McCurdle. Donald Trump spoke at her convention. And on top of that, Donald Trump said that if he wins the upcoming election, he will free Ross Ulbricht and he will appoint a libertarian to his cabinet. Now, why would Trump be doing these things? Why would South Korea be doing these things? It looks to me like there's a chance Trump could pull through. But he would need some kind of mass movement. If Trump was just going to be a shill, he wouldn't need Angela and he wouldn't need North Korea. Right? If Trump was a shill, he would be apologizing for having met with Kim Jong-un. He's not apologizing. He's bragging about it. If Trump was going to be a shill, he wouldn't need Angela. He wouldn't need the libertarians to support him. He wouldn't be promising to put a libertarian in his cabinet. He wouldn't be promising to free Ross Ulbricht. But he does need them. And there's a chance that Donald Trump could go into his second term at odds with the bulk of his class, representing lower-level capitalists who don't want war and don't want a police state for their own reasons and who think it's communism. There's a chance that Donald Trump could take office under such circumstances, and that would be the ideal outcome. But the thing that I want you all to understand, and let me make this point very hard, whether Kamala wins, whether Trump wins, under any circumstances, what really will determine things is the balance of forces, is the movement that we can build. We need to build an anti-imperialist movement in America. The reason they're targeting the Uhuru movement is not because they're Democrats, not because they're Republicans, because they built infrastructure. The Uhuru movement has built community structures. They have actual power in St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Petersburg, Florida, and that is what the ruling class is scared of. We need a mass movement. And I am so frustrated with people whose understanding is limited to it's all just about who we can vote for. I was talking to one person. It was like, in her mind, it was all just, she was trying to find the perfect third-party candidate. You know, and I'm disappointed by this person because, you know, and she was mad at everyone who'd ever been sympathetic to RFK, and she was mad at anyone who liked Tucker Carlson. It was like all these people came along and they weren't perfect, and if we could just find the perfect third-party candidate and then go campaign for them, everything would be fine. And she doesn't understand it's not about third-party candidates. It's about the movement to back them up. And that politicians that take bad stances on some things can be pushed in different directions when there's a mass movement. And that thinking that it's all just about who do you vote for and who's perfect, who's the perfect one to vote for, is missing the point entirely. It's about the balance of forces. It's about the strength of the anti-imperialist movement globally and the working class movement. And that what we do is important, right? I have got to tell you, I'm going to put this video on. We were in front of the White House last spring. And if you think this didn't make a difference, you are wrong. I think this made a big difference. How did this stop? This was a great moment. June 30th, 2019. The leader of People's Korea and the leader of the United States shook hands. They met, the first president ever to visit the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We had Donald Trump trying to make peace with a country that is still technically at war with the United States. Donald Trump was trying to open the door to peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. There would be hope to bring the troops home from South Korea. There would be hope that there could be denuclearization, that North Korea wouldn't feel threatened anymore, that there could be no more bombs and weapons, and the people of Korea could reunify. And Donald Trump going to People's Korea was sabotaged. It was sabotaged by John Bolton and the neocons, the same forces that got us into Ukraine, the same forces that are escalating and pushing buttons against China and Taiwan on the Taiwan Strait, the same forces that want World War III sabotaged the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. We're here to say, finish what Trump started. We want peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. We want U.S. leaders and the leaders of People's Korea to sit down. We would like to see trade between the United States and People's Korea. We would like to see those railroads in South Korea that have been built. We'd like to see them in action and see the Korean people trading with each other. We don't want war. We don't want money wasted on international confrontations. And we also don't want a police state. And at the same time that the big bankers who control Joe Biden, the Silicon Valley monopolists and fascists, the same forces that control Joe Biden, are waging a war not just around the world, but against the American people. They are driving our country into poverty. Our trains are derailing. People are breathing in deadly chemicals. The water is not properly purified. Jobs are falling apart. Schools are falling apart. It's a nightmare. They have waged a war against us. And instead of rebuilding America, they're trying to move toward a low-wage police state. That's what they're doing here in the United States. They're trying to move toward a low-wage police state. We saw what happened, what's been revealed about January 6th. That was a setup. We saw that those people were led to do what they did for propaganda purposes. We call for an amnesty. We don't endorse what the people did, but they were enabled to do it and set up to do it by the American government. The FBI, the Secret Service, other agencies enabled what happened on January 6th to happen. Those folks were entrapped. And we say that until they're going to be honest with the public about what really happened on January 6th, there needs to be an amnesty for those who've been arrested. And the same goes for the Uhuru movement. A group of black revolutionaries, black activists, had guns pointed in their faces, drones flown into their homes. They were terrorized and accused of being Russian agents. Why? Because they were organizing for the rights of black people, organizing for the rights in their community, providing services that were not available in their community. They're waging a war against us. At the same time, they're waging a war against China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and any country that dares break out of their financial system. And it is our responsibility to oppose it and to join arm in arm with the people of the world against imperialism.
Yeah. You think us marching around with that banner didn't make a difference? Being out in front of the UN with that banner, being in Union Square with that banner, printing a book and bringing it to the World Youth Festival about, the hope for peace on the Korean Peninsula. You think that didn't make a difference? I think it made a huge difference. I think actually what we did, our efforts as the Center for Political Innovation made a huge difference. Right? And it shows we're not a huge group. We're not a huge group, but we got that image of Donald Trump with Kim Jong-un. We got it out there, and we rallied in Washington, D.C. with it, and we rallied in New York City with it, and we published a book, and we gave it to the North Koreans, and we gave it to people at the World Youth Festival. We gave it to many different people. We made a difference. We made a difference, right? And this is how you change the world, is you mobilize and you organize, right? If you want to join, go to the website, go to cpiusa.org, hit join, and there's an email, and you send an email there, and we'll connect you. Right now, we're in a period of organizational transition. You can't, sign up and start paying dues on the website at this point. We're being a little careful. But, yeah, if you want to get involved, that's the best way to get involved, is to send an email. But it's about the balance of forces. And it's not about just voting. And also it's not, recognizing that Trump winning is the better outcome, right? Doesn't make me endorse everything that Trump did. It doesn't even mean that I'm going to necessarily vote for Trump. I probably will not vote for Trump because I live in New York and my electoral votes will just go to Biden anyway. I will probably vote for one of the third party candidates who won't stand a chance. But, I think that'll probably have a bigger impact to have it go on record somewhere that somebody, has anti-imperialist views than it would be to just vote for Trump. But who knows, right? That it's not about which candidate wins. It's about the kind of movement we can build. And no matter who wins, the kind of movement we build can make a difference. And that's what I wish people could just understand, right? And I there's a primitive understanding that thinks it's all about voting and thinks it's about finding the perfect candidate. It is not about either of those things, right? And I'm frustrated with those who understand things in shallow terms. But anyway, so let's do the roll call. I'll call you all out as I see you, then I'll start answering people's questions. I see we've got one Rumble rant, and we've got 2 super chats, so I will answer them as they come in. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Auckland, New Zealand, Kiwi Corner. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Chris from West Virginia. Building a movement will make a difference. Exactly. JDL from Missouri. Fakino from Montreal. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Alex in Brazil. Ottawa, Ontario. Phil in Dublin. Alex in Ontario. Mariah in North Carolina. Dan in LA area. Dan made a great morning message, which I will put on for you all. It was really, really great. Jacob in Wisconsin. Denver, Minnesota. Ryan in Kansas City. Malaysia. Grapentine. Shallow Voter, St. Louis, Missouri. Gregory Duffel in Victoria, British Columbia. Right in Jenny Lynn, I'm in Siberia. Right in Jenny Lynn, I'm in Siberia. Right in Jenny Lynn, I'm in Siberia. And that should be a new song. Somebody get to work on that. All right. Brett, High River, Alberta. Downers Grove, Illinois. Jacob Go Packers. Jacob Go Packers. Zach in Florida. Chicago will be busy at the Jimmy Dore show tomorrow. Great crew of folks. Great crew of folks. Thank you to everyone who is making an effort to get our books out in Chicago. If you don't think it's making a difference, ask yourself about what just happened on the Korean Peninsula. It makes a difference what we do. It makes a big difference. And getting our books out there and putting our message out there is making a difference. Toei in Sweden. John Hoban in China. Grapevine. Madison, Wisconsin. Phil is in Chicago. Yes, he is. He's helping out. Phil is a beloved member of our community. Glad Phil is there and comfortable. I hope he has a great time while he's in the Windy City. Hey, Phil, says Gabby Hernandez. Anybody else? Names and locations. Well, I want to put on Dan's morning message. So Dan Niswander, Ken Weed in the Twilight Zone, Jenny Lynn for president, Dave in Rochester. So every morning, just a reminder, every morning on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel, we have morning messages every single morning. And it's a great activity that our community does as a way to keep people engaged, right? As a way that people can just be engaged in this community, can be supporting each other. It gives people a chance to step up to the plate and show what they've got and all of that. It's really, really a great thing, right? It's a thing that we're doing, as our community, is that we have this, this activity of creating morning messages. Now, one of the people who has stepped up to the plate and done morning messages is Dan Niswander. And he's out in California. And he's a great guy. I met him when I was out in California. And, he's a musician. He has a band. And he's been in alternative media for a long time. Just a great dude all around. Dan. Got to spend some time with him out in Cali. It was pretty cool. So Dan made a morning message, and it was a good one. And I want to show Dan's morning message. It was morning message 111. And it was on August 14th, but it was so good, I don't want it to be forgotten. And I want to just show you how cool these morning messages are. The morning message, the morning messages that are that we do every morning. They're on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. Let me pull up the link to that channel just so you have it, right? We do them every morning, and you can make one now. We have this great link below the video. We have a link where you can just upload one very easily. It's a great thing. So this is the YouTube channel where we have the morning messages. We need morning messages. We need more people to step up to the plate and make morning messages. But this is the link where you can watch one. They premiere every morning at 6 a.m. And if you would like to make one, let me drop the link where you can make one. Hold on. The link where you can make one, submit a morning message is here. And then we're going to show Dan's. We're going to show Dan's great morning message that he did. Here's the link to submit a morning message. And if you are so inspired, please submit one right now because it's important, right? We really need people to step up to the plate and make morning messages. So please go ahead and do it. Make a morning message. Now I am going to put on Dan's great morning message because it's really great. He did multiple locations. He went above and beyond, right? You can just make it with your phone, but Dan did a great job. So I'm going to put on Dan's morning message, and it's called it's Be Aware of Good Opportunities.
Oh, this is Dan with the Center for Political Innovation morning message. I want to talk about outreach and also give you a message of hope. And it's very, very important to be aware of good opportunities to share information. And CPI has been great about that. Being in the right place at the right time, like at the Libertarian Convention, and in Milwaukee, and in Chicago for the Democratic Party Convention, with books like this or booklets with very important information. Because you never know when you're going to get into conversations with people. And if you can't get into a conversation, that moment when you might be able to talk to somebody for a few minutes and give them a booklet that they can read later, it's very important because you never know what kind of an impact that's going to have. When you know, even in just that few minutes of time, there is interest, right? Basing on how you frame the topic that you want to give them. And that's why it's important to kind of have an elevator speech or even a soundbite to see how the response will be. And I'm finding even as I go about and do different things in social gatherings, there are those moments of time where those conversations happen. Some are short. I've had conversations even up to an hour long talking about topics like this, not just these topics, but included in the conversation. That's why it's really important, the work that CPI does with historical information and how it ties in with current events, because to understand how we got to where we are, you usually have to understand where we've come from, right? So it's very important that this information is put out there, even in just sound bites. I do that even with media, making videos. It's food for thought, so that people can feel like they're not alone, and leave them with, as I want to leave you, with this feeling of hope that there is a way that we can get through this. And I think we also have to include economics in the conversation. This, I think, is the greatest opportunity that we have had since Occupy Wall Street to get that message out too, because it ties a lot of things in together, explaining how we got to where we are now. And we're going to be seeing a lot of things that coming up that we're going to need to be aware of, and how to present it in a way that offers solutions. So here is one of the things I'm doing on video, reading from this book, and to see what kind of reaction that I get as I share it around. So have a great day, week, wherever you are, and peace now. Hello, this is Dan Now Man Nicewinder. I'm going to read a little bit from the book, Do You Believe in Growth? Sometimes just little bits at a time are enough to digest, you know. So that's what I want to do with this book and sharing it with you. So this is an excerpt from a section in the book about a government of action. We believe in growth. A new economy is rising around the world, and in China, Russia, Vietnam, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Iran, Syria, and other countries that continue to resist the all-out war drive against them from Wall Street, growth is also the priority. Too many people exist in a dark, pessimistic state of being, left behind by a society that has no place for them. In our high-tech world, the strengths of every individual can be utilized to make life more beautiful. The narrow limits and artificial restrictions imposed by the dominion of ultra-monopolists must be broken. China is not our enemy. Our enemy is an outdated, irrational system where the chaos of the market takes precedence over humanity's intrinsic need and drive to expand to greater heights. A new world beyond imperialism, where countries trade with each other on the basis of win-win cooperation, and all humanity marches toward a world without scarcity or state coercion, can be realized. Consider that one. This is Dan Elman Nice Wonder from the heart of Los Angeles, the original Los Angeles, Olvera Street. Stay present in the moment. Peace now.
I think that was a great message. That was really, really great. And we really appreciate that Dan has taken the initiative to make so many of these great messages. So on that note, it was a great message. But go and make one yourself, Alex, and go and make one, Joe, in North Carolina. Go and make a message now. We need people to go and make morning messages, because we have to do one every day. Every single day, we need to have a morning message. And it is not easy to get one every day. And I'm often calling people and saying, hey, can you make a message, please? So please step up to the plate and make a morning message because we need this community to stay alive. And thank you, Dan. It was awesome. It was a great message. I loved it. So on that note, I'm going to start answering people's questions. Now we've got a few super chats that have come in, but please send more super chats. It's a way to support the work that I do. At this point, a lot of the funds that I have coming in go straight back into CPI organizing. It's a way to support the work that I do. It also supports me living in New York City and having to live in this very overpriced, expensive apartment where I have an extra room where I can stream. My wife and I are very happy, but it's very expensive. So there we go. All right. So the first question that I have here is a Rumble rant, and it says Jill Stein took $44,000 from Alphabet in 2016 and from Lockheed Martin. Is she really independent? I don't care. First of all, the website that links to is Open Secrets. And the thing is, Jill Stein's not going to win, right? Jill Stein is a third-party candidate. We live in a rigged two-party system. And until that changes, Jill Stein has no chance in hell of winning. She's running to make a statement, right? Now, there are things in Jill Stein's platform that I do not agree with. There's degrowth, environmental stuff. I would not join the Green Party. But, there's a lot that she's saying about foreign policy, Israel and Palestine, Ukraine. Was good. There's some other things she said over the years that I agree with. I think she plays a pretty positive role at this point. And I think that having her as part of the discourse is good. I don't think she's going to win the election. And also, I don't necessarily think she's beholden to those companies. I think that employees who work at those companies donated that money. But regardless, she's running to make a statement and get her ideas out there. Not all of her ideas do I agree with, but some of them are pretty good. And she's playing a pretty decent role at this time. She supports the Uhuru movement. I'm glad she's out there and part of the discourse with her ideas. So there you go. All righty. So now I'm going to answer people's regular super chats. So there we go. So the first one that comes in is, what do you think of Olof Palme? I don't know much about him. Olof Palme was the prime minister of Sweden, in the 1960s. And he was very much, a sympathizer of various anti-colonial movements. And he was very much in favor of expanding the welfare state. He was sympathetic to the Soviet Union. I know that, the European welfare states really escalated in the post-World War II years. And I know that the anti-Vietnam War movement and leftism really kind of escalated during the late 60s, especially. And so he was probably a product of his time, and that there were big divisions within the ruling class. And I think Sweden is an imperialist country, but, it's not part of the British. It's not British. It's not America. It's not Britain. It's not America. It's not part of the club, and that they have always, the Norwegian countries have always been more willing to work with Russia than, and friendlier to the Soviet Union. They've always had more of a welfare state, at least since World War II, than even some of the Western European countries, than France, Britain. So, I'm not surprised that someone like that would take office. Outside of Britain and America, even outside of America, it's not uncommon to have socialistic people. Right? You could never have a Jeremy Corbyn in America. We had Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders kind of abandoned any aspect of his anti-war stuff in the late 90s, right? Bernie Sanders was a lot more like Jeremy Corbyn when he was younger, but then in the, the late 60s, or in the late 90s, Bernie Sanders became pro-war and basically denounced all the communist governments, and he became, kind of much more of an interventionist and stuff. Jeremy Corbyn never did that. Jeremy Corbyn kept his anti-war credentials, his sympathy for the Palestinians, etc. So yeah, there you go. There you go. So I mean, in Britain, you have a regular left in Britain. Even in the 60s, when there was the height of the new left in the West, the movement in Britain still had more of a class grounding. Listen to the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones, they have an album, Beggar's Banquet. And the album has a song, Street Fighting Man, which is about like rioting, young people going out and rioting against the government. But then it has the last track of their album is called is Salt of the Earth, right? Which that comes from a Bible verse, you are the salt of the earth. But it's about the working class. Let's drink to the hardworking people. Yeah, you have George Galloway in Britain. That there's much more of a like left in the sense that I used to call myself left. I don't call myself left or right at this point. Because what's the point? I don't agree with wokeism. I am not part of the woke movement, and I view the left as having some spiritual problems, right? And I guess that brings me to the next super chat. Was militant atheism in socialist countries a mistake? 100% it was a mistake. Absolutely. You cannot build God's kingdom on earth without God. I believe that religion is essential. I believe that the militant atheism in socialist countries was because they were coming out of feudalism. And in a feudal society, religion is not a choice. It is imposed, and it is a vehicle through which corrupt, man-made institutions prop themselves up. And that under such circumstances, the church becomes corrupted, and it stands for corrupt earthly forces, and people need to sweep it away. But then once it is swept away, people can reconnect with the higher power, right? And that, the church originated as an institution that was to connect people with God. But over the course of thousands of years of feudalism, over the course of 2,000 years between the life of Christ and today, the church in feudalism became an institution that didn't do that. It played the opposite role. It propped up earthly oppressors. And so it was swept away. And now we live in a period where religion is not imposed, where religion is not a tool. And we live in a period where the ruling class, I would argue, the imperialists, are atheists. They're Ayn Rand atheists. They're atheists in the sense that they believe religion is bad because believing in right and wrong is for fools. They're atheists in the sense that they think, they think being religious is a stupid working class thing. They think right and wrong doesn't exist. They believe in the virtue of selfishness. They believe in Friedrich Nietzsche and philosophical irrationalism. And that this is a time for the working class to reclaim our religious roots. And I think Christianity began as the movement of the proletariat in ancient Rome. That's a whole nother tangent we can go on. And I think that when it really gets down to it, communism and Christianity originally served the same purpose. Karl Marx had his problems, and he originated, and he himself had his own issues, and his movement originated in the French Revolutionary period, in the aftermath of the French Revolution and such. And so his movement was somewhat spiritually tainted, and that's a problem. And the communist countries of the world have been trying to correct that. And I would argue that leftism without economics, leftism just as a spiritual force, is what wokeism is, and it's very bad. Whereas communist countries have largely moved away from the aesthetic, from the rebellion aesthetic and the psychology of leftism, and they're using socialism to be builders, to be constructors. And that's why innovationism as a school of thought is so important. What we are doing is cutting edge. It probably wouldn't seem that profound in Vietnam or in China or elsewhere, but what we are doing in the United States is really, really important, right? And that people run behind us. People tail after us, copying, trying to do what we do, trying to learn from us, but they'll never be able to do what we do because they don't understand it, right? They don't understand it. And, I wish them well. But we're doing something really, really spectacular. We are always 3-4 years ahead of the people that trail behind us in a competitive, hostile way because we have a deeper understanding. And that right now, it is just not right. It is the wrong approach to be trying to own the word communism, right? To get into a battle, to be like, the word communism belongs to me. I own the word communism. That is not the way to organize in our time, right? You gain nothing from that, in my view, from getting the trademark, the copyright on communism and saying communism belongs to me. I own communism. What does that mean? To most Americans right now, communism means woke. I don't want to own woke. I don't want to be associated with woke. I identify with the global anti-imperialist movement, and I want to build a working class movement to save America and break America out of imperialism. And Marxism-Leninism is a big part of my understanding of how the world works. And so I will continue to study and expound upon those principles. I will continue to educate people, and I will continue to build a movement. But my belief in God and my looking up to the teachings and studying the teachings of Jesus Christ is a big part of what I believe. I've also delved into other spiritual practices that are important, and we've talked about that. We have a psychoanalytic approach. We talk about transference. We talk about, other aspects. And so we draw from different wells, and that's okay. But Marxism-Leninism is the foundation. There would be no global anti-imperialism without Marxism-Leninism. But Marxism-Leninism had its issues, and we can acknowledge that as well. And that we are doing something. We are pioneers. There's a reason we are the Center for Political Innovation, because we are innovators. We are innovators. All right. Are you familiar with Revolutionary Roads, one of the first of its kind ML travel channel? I'm not familiar with it. And I mean, look, I know nothing about this YouTube channel. Nothing about it. So, I don't want to give a hostile response because I know nothing about it. If that YouTube channel likes what I do, if they want to come on here and talk, great. I mean, I don't know anything about that channel or who runs it, but I just immediately get a bad feeling because there's been a pattern that has been going on. I have been doing YouTube streams now since 2017, I think. There's a pattern that happens. I'll just tell you about this pattern. All right. I'm on here and I'm just talking about the ideas that I believe in. I'm just talking about what I know. And new YouTube channels pop up, and they're run usually by rich kids that are from a wealthy background, that are in their early 20s or younger. They're from a wealthy background and they want to be internet famous. And they have a pile of their parents' money with which to make expensive videos and hire people to edit videos for them and all of that. And they pop up and they hate me. Right? And this has happened over and over and over again. Vosh, Thought Slime. I mean, all of these. I mean, there's just so many of them at this point. And it's all the same. And they pop up and they see my YouTube channel. And they just seethe with rage. How dare he? And then what happens is a bunch of people who like their YouTube channel get mad at me. And are like, why can't you just get along with so-and-so? And it's like, I don't know who so-and-so is. And I will try to be friendly to this person. And I will go on their streams and be polite to them. And they will attack me. And this person just seethes with rage. And then there's a bunch of people who watch their channel and watch my channel. And they want to keep liking their channel. And so they have to decide it's my fault. Why can't you just get along with so-and-so? And I say, I'm trying to get along with so-and-so. They don't want to get along with me. And it becomes my fault that this big YouTuber with a huge budget, this rich kid who's starting a YouTube channel, wants to be internet famous, is mad at me. And I try to be nice and get along with the person. The person keeps ridiculing me and attacking me. And the attacks are never about really what I believe. They're always either a distortion of what I believe or personal attacks. And people get mad at me. And then I always get a bunch of people that want to be the back channel. Ooh, I'm in the same Discord service. So I can make you be friends with them. No, you can't. No, you can't. It would be very easy for them to be friends with me. They don't want to be friends with me. This has happened so many times at this point. And it's happened more recently, but it's the same story. And it was hard for me to recognize that it was the same story because it was framed politically differently. Usually the people attacking me in the past have been woke. Now these people at least have a history of being anti-woke or whatever, but it's the same story, right? If they wanted to get along with me, they would. They don't. And it's not my fault. And, every time this happens, every time this happens, there's not a bunch of people, but there's a handful of people who insist that it's my fault. And look, I can get along with anybody. I am a pretty agreeable, polite person. It is not in my nature to, I get angry with people. Sometimes I get frustrated with people and I don't like, being harassed and attacked, but I generally am pretty agreeable. But there's always somebody who insists, why can't you just be nice to Thought Slime? It's like, why can't you just get along with Wash? And more recently, there's been some other people. And it's the same story. These are rich kids. Their mommy and daddy gave them a lot of money. And they hired a public relations firm. And they've got a bot army to make them internet famous. And they always have a bunch of wannabes following after them, right? Of like wannabes who are like bragging about the one time they were in the room with them. Oh, he's my friend. Yeah, I met him one time. Oh yeah, I'm really special. So you got a bunch of wannabes that chase after them, right? And I mean, look, if these people want to get along with me, fine. I don't think you're wrong. Mariah. But if these people want to be my friend, they can. And if they don't, they don't. And, and if you want to believe it's my fault, I can't stop you from believing that. But I am a very agreeable person. I'm a very forgiving person. There are people that I have fought with before that I've become good friends with. I am a very forgiving person. I'm a very agreeable person. But we ain't got time for that. There's a bunch of silly, it's the same old story. Rich kids on the internet who decide, and what it really gets down to, I am convinced, okay? I can't read minds. At the end of the day, I don't really know why these people hate me. We can speculate. Are they being incentivized to not like me? Do they have people that are, inciting them against me or whatever? But I think what it really gets down to is that I know this shit. Look at this bookshelf. I've lived it. I've written books. I've built the conferences. I've done the work. I've lived this since I was an adult. I mean, my entire adult life, I've been doing this. So I know this in a way these people don't. And I can explain these ideas in a way that these people can't. And I've lived it. And if you are simply an individualist, if this is not about collaborating with people and building a mass movement, if it's just an ego contest, they think every time I stream, right? Every time I stream, I'm showing them up somehow. Oh, that Caleb, he's always better than me. He's trying to outdo me. I'm not trying to outdo you. I don't have anywhere near the budget you've got. I don't have a rich mom and dad to, pay people to edit videos for me and shit. I'm just doing this, and I do this because I have to do it. And I do this because I couldn't stop. This is the only way I know how to do this, is to do this. And, I'm not going to stop doing it. I couldn't stop. I would go crazy. I didn't stream for a few months, like 2 years ago, and I about lost my mind. I love doing it so much. And these people get mad at me and they just seethe with rage. And then what's frustrating is that there's always a handful of people who just somehow are convinced it is my fault, right? It's my fault. I personally went out of my way to antagonize this big YouTuber and get them mad at me because I'm just a big meanie or something. And it's like, that is not the case, right? It's not the case. And so I don't know. I don't know what to say, you know, and I can't spend too much time on this. I really can't spend too much time on this. The other thing that I will say, right, and this is another thing that has come up, is that, you know, I have been subjected to some pretty extreme harassment. You know, I would call what I've been subjected to sexual harassment. I would call what I've been subjected to, you know, defamation on a very high level. And there are some people who, in addition to thinking it's all my fault because I just won't forgive people or something like that, which is not the case. I'm happy to reconcile with people. In addition to that, there are certain people who, in their minds, what's happened to me is no big deal. You know, what's happened to me? Oh, it's all just fine. Well, no, it's a pretty big deal. You know, you disagree with me politically. The first round of smears that I got was that I was a white supremacist, which I am not, right? I am not a white supremacist. And calling someone a Nazi in everyday life might just be an insult, but in communist circles, that is a call for your murder. That's a call for your assassination. And when I was in communist groups, we got in fist fights with Nazis. We would, communist groups, they do things like this. They find out where Nazis are and they show up with baseball bats and beat the hell out of them. Right? You can read about, what Antifa does now, communist groups have done for quite a long time. And I was involved in, stuff. I'm not going to go into detail about what I was involved in, but I became aware of stuff. So to have it all over the internet that I'm a neo-Nazi is a pretty big fucking deal. It's not a joke. It's not a political disagreement. It's not funny. It's a big fucking deal. Now, and when I went to go support the students at New School University in 2018, 2017, the students were occupying the cafeteria. I was escorted out of the building because the students read on the internet that I was a neo-Nazi. Well, I am not a fucking neo-Nazi. I never have been. I'm in an interracial marriage. I was going to court with police brutality victims before Black Lives Matter was ever tweeted. I have a long record as an anti-racist. But because these evil people wanted to destroy my life and reputation, they announced to the world I was a neo-Nazi, and it had very serious consequences for me and for my wife. And when I go to Palestine rallies to cover them as a reporter, and you'd think the last place they'd ever call you a neo-Nazi or anti-Semitic would be a Palestine rally. But a number of times I go to the Palestine rally and then somebody runs over to me. It's always somebody in a mask. You're a white supremacist, Caleb. We're going to fuck you up. Every time. Right? So people who think this is all just a big, fun internet game, it's not a game, right? It has had real consequences. And there are obviously other things I've been attacked on, other things that are really out of bounds, right? That are really, really out of bounds. And so in addition to people who think somehow it's my fault that I just won't just forgive these people, I will forgive these people. I will reconcile. These people will not reconcile. That has been made clear. Number one, right? Number two, right? There are people who think, oh, it's no big deal what you've been subjected to. It's just like when somebody tweeted at me and was mean the other day. No, it's not that. It is not that. No, when you've got videos with hundreds of thousands of views proclaiming that you're secretly a white supremacist pretending to be a communist, and you get escorted out of leftist spaces because of that, right? They remove you from spaces. That's a big fucking deal, right? When other things are out there that prevent, people that you work with from getting jobs, that cause things to happen to your relatives, that's a big fucking deal. And people who think, oh, it's no big deal. Oh, it's just like how people were mean to me. One of these losers, she was, anyway, I'm not going to go into detail, right? People think it's no big deal. It's a big deal. People are mean to each other on the internet, but what has been done to me is very unique and it's very specific. And I'm not here to make a woe is me case. And if somebody starts in with this, oh, it's no big deal shit, I'm not going to debate them. I'm not going to argue with them. But I'm really done with them. I really am. I really am done with them, right? It's one thing to encourage me not to get demoralized and keep going, but it is something different when people are just like, oh, it's no big deal. Somebody tweeted a mean thing at me the other day. It's like, you don't get it. You don't get it, right? I have kept going, and this organization has kept going, and I have survived, career-ending cancels, right? Anybody else under the circumstances that I've been through would have given up, if I didn't have to do this, if I was not so spiritually invested in what I do, I would have given up a long goddamn time ago. I believe in what I'm doing. I have been dragged through the coals and all of that. And none of these jokers who criticize me would stand a second of what I've been through, right? These people, you know, who tell me it's no big deal and all that, you get escorted out of a space, right? You have people that you were close friends with thinking that you're a neo-Nazi and a white supremacist. You have your private life and things that do not belong in the internet, traumas that you've got and personal problems that are nobody else's goddamn business put all over the internet to embarrass you and to try and cause you problems. You would collapse under what I've been through. But I withstand and I keep going because I'm the real fucking deal, right? And that scares the crap out of phonies. So be it. So be it. Look, I am not in this to be internet famous, right? Because the internet is rigged. And in fact, at this point, I think the only reason this YouTube channel even exists is for me to facilitate the construction of the in real life community and the in real life organization that needs to be built. That's the only reason this YouTube channel even exists. And I have flirted with the idea of making it for members only. Now, every time I say that, there's a huge blowback. A lot of people message me and text me and say, don't do that, Caleb. Don't do that, Caleb. Well, okay. There's part of me that feels like I shouldn't just be out there. And there's also part of me that feels that our community needs to learn to recruit in real life and draw people in, not through randomly finding me on the internet. And that the orientation of building this group by people randomly finding the YouTube channel is not the correct orientation. That said, you know, every time I mention the idea of having these streams be private or whatever, people lose their minds. People just say, no, I can't do that. And they're probably right. I don't know. Part of me feels like what I want is I want our community to grow by recruiting people in real life and not depend on this channel. And number two, I don't want to throw my pearls before swine. Now, you all are not swine. You all love me and I love you. But there are people who watch this stuff and use the things that I say here and use it for nefarious purposes to harm me, to harm other people. You know, there's people who have access to this. It's all just out there. Anybody can watch right now. There's 145 of you viewing live right now. There'll be at least 1,000 people, you know, who see this afterwards. And there will be people who have access to everything that's here and will use it for bad purposes. And I don't want to give, you know, everything I've got here to those bad folks, but who will use it for evil, right? You know, and it's like the nuclear codes, right? I mean, the nuclear codes could be used for somebody to build defense to prevent, you know, an attack on their country, or it could be used by a terrorist who wants to nuke somebody and blow them up, right? I mean, you just put the nuclear codes out on the internet, anyone can see them. And right now there's times where I feel like that's what I'm doing. I'm putting the nuclear codes out here on the internet. You know, I'm putting the nuclear codes out here on the internet, and anyone can grab them and use them against me to harm me, or they can, you know, so whatever. But for now, I'm streaming on the internet, right? You know, and it seems like the idea that I would just stop this channel and we could actually build an in real life community. You know, we would go all in real life and have these streams be only for members of our organization. That seems to be an unrealistic fantasy on my part, right? It just doesn't seem to match reality. But what needs to change is our online orientation must change. We cannot continue to be online oriented. We can't. It's a dead end for all the reasons I've just gone over. We've got to not be an online oriented group. We need to start recruiting people in real life. We need to recruit people who would never go looking for this, people who would never be attracted, you know, to never go look for a YouTube channel about communism. That's who we need to be talking to. And that is difficult. It is not easy, but it's a transition that we have to make organizationally. And I appreciate some of the recent developments because they've reiterated how important it is to make that change. Every time we say we're going to make that change, we don't do it, right? And then we go back on the easy way out, the shortcuts. And now we have a year before our next convention. We set our date for our next convention. And, you know, July 12th, 2025, we're having a national convention in Chicago. It's going to have over 400 people there. How are we going to get 400 people to have come to a mega anti-imperialist rally in Chicago? We're going to do it by learning to do the work. And it's not easy, right? It's not easy to learn to do the work. It's difficult, but people are doing it. Gabby's doing it. Gabby's been working her butt off to make it happen. Other people, right? But we are going to fill an auditorium with 400 people next July. We are going to do it. And I think we can do it if we make ourselves do the work, right? It's time to take the training wheels off and learn to ride the bike. And we got a whole year to do it. Not hard. But every time we have an event, we say we're going to do it and we don't do it. Now is the time. We just got to take the training wheels off the bike and do it. And it will. And we will easily do it. I have no doubt in my mind we will do it, but we have to make ourselves do it. Out of the movement to the masses. So there we go. All right. Your nuanced take on the good and bad things about Saddam Hussein. That's how George W. Bush used to call it. George Herbert Walker Bush would call him H.W. Bush. But Saddam Hussein, the good things about Saddam Hussein, the good and bad things about Saddam Hussein a couple days ago was interesting. Can you do a similar analysis of Milosevic? Well, look, all I can say about Milosevic is that, Yugoslavia, the Socialist Federation of Yugoslavia, was coming apart, and he represented the part that stayed socialist, right? And that's what he represented. And he, Serbia remained socialist. It was like market socialism, but it was still, a socialist country, and he was the leader of it. And he wouldn't privatize the country. He wouldn't, and so the Kosovo Liberation Army was formed as an Islamist insurgency against him. And were there atrocities committed against the Kosovo Liberation Army? Absolutely. Were ethnic Albanians who made up the Kosovo Liberation Army? Were they treated unfairly? Absolutely. But, big but here, it wasn't genocide. And the United Nations and others have said, yeah, there was no genocide in Yugoslavia. Right? There was no genocide in Serbia. And, the idea that it was the same as Nazi Germany or something, that wasn't true. And the bombing that was carried out was completely illegitimate and killed a lot more people than Milosevic did. Right? It killed a lot more people. It was completely illegitimate based on lies, as always. And the movement, the color revolution movement, Otpor, to remove Milosevic was completely bullshit. I used to work for Ramsey Clark, and he was Milosevic's lawyer. And we published, International Action Center, we published The Defense Speaks, the opening speech of Slobodan Milosevic to the court. The United Nations laid out the details. Michael Parenti wrote a great book called To Kill a Nation, going into great detail about it. And that Milosevic was a leader of Serbia who would not dismantle socialism. And so his country was bombed and people were killed. The Muslim world, unfortunately, sided with the Albanians because they were Muslims. The ethnic Albanians that formed the Kosovo Liberation Army were Muslims. And so a lot of Muslims, the Iranians, the Iraqis, a lot of the Palestinians, others don't agree with me on this. But I take the Serbian position and the Russian position on that conflict. The bombing of Serbia was completely illegitimate. Slobodan Milosevic was not a, mass murderer. Were there atrocities in the war? Sure. But is he another Hitler? No. And that it was completely illegitimate. And what Bill Clinton did in former Yugoslavia was wrong. I mean, I take that position. And that position is not what a lot of people want to hear. And it's complicated. But, Russia and Serbia are very close, and Russians understand this, and that the use of the Kosovo Liberation Army of Islamic extremists kind of paved the way for what happened in Syria, what happened in Libya. I mean, it was the use of Saudi Arabia to fund Wahhabi Muslim extremist counter gangs to dismantle an anti-imperialist country. It's similar to what was done in Chechnya, where the USA funded, Chechen separatists. Similar to what was done in Afghanistan, where the USA forced the Soviet Union to militarily intervene in Afghanistan and then had Osama bin Laden build up an army of Wahhabi fanatics. This tends to be the liberals who do this more than the conservatives. The liberals tend to build up armies of Muslim extremists to do their fighting for them. I mean, Reagan did it in Afghanistan. So, I mean, these things, I mean, it's not only the liberals, but it's a policy the U.S. government has waged, and it has backfired because these same nutty terrorist groups that the USA funds around the world to fight in Syria and to fight in Libya and to fight in Afghanistan, to fight in Chechnya, they turn around and attack America. Right? The Pulse nightclub shooter, his father had fought against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. Right? And then he came to the United States, and his son became a crazy extremist that shot up the Pulse nightclub. The Tsarnaev brothers, their parents fought against the Soviet Union in Chechnya. And then they came and, killed a bunch of people at the Boston Marathon. The New Jersey bomber, Ahmed Rahami, again, his family fought against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. He came over here and he bombed, blew some stuff up in New Jersey. Right? These kinds of radical extremists, you train radical extremists, if you make a dog, you give a dog rabies and you get it all riled up so it's in a rabid fit, it might bite you. And that's what happened, right? The Manchester bomber. The Manchester bomber had fought Gaddafi. The British government didn't like Gaddafi, so they armed all these crazy Muslim extremists in Libya to fight Gaddafi. And one of them came back to Britain. He'd fought against Gaddafi, and he did the exact same thing he did in Libya. He did it in Britain, and he blew up the concert, killed a bunch of innocent people. Well, he'd already been doing that in Libya, and the British government thought it was great when he was doing that in Libya, and then he came back and he did it in Britain. Oopsie daisy. If you arm and train radical extremists and you give them visas for what they do, they'll come back and do it to you. I mean, it's not that hard to understand. But anyhow, that's really all I've got for you for tonight, folks. I will, be back probably tomorrow. Might be late because I've got a full day tomorrow. Let me put it that way. But hey, we're doing the things that we do. Shout out to all the people doing hard work for our organization, the door knockers, the people who worked hard on those door knockers, the people who worked hard, who are getting books out in Chicago, traveled to Chicago, or they're in Chicago facilitating and helping. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And look at what just happened on the Korean Peninsula. And do not doubt for a minute that the work that we do makes a difference. It makes a difference. And I do believe in God. And I do believe that we're here with a purpose. So I do want everyone to just remember that it is not easy to do what we do, but we have to push back. We have to keep struggling, and we have to never give up. And on that note, I'm going to put on the closing music. Thanks, everybody. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.